Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Alicia Willett. I'm the president and dean here at the law school, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all. I want to start off with a small housekeeping matter. A couple of you have asked about the CLE forms. You will get those elusive ethics credit. Your certificate will say that. We apologize for any stress caused by the lack of ethics credits. We're going to fix that up. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Albany Law School for today's program, focusing on the pivotal role and responsibility of lawyers in ensuring access to justice, preserving the rule of law, and protecting civil and human rights in our democracy today. Albany Law, through its programs and other initiatives, is participating in this month's March for Justice, a statewide effort by the New York law schools, helping to keep our courthouse doors open to the most vulnerable Americans, including our veterans, survivors of domestic violence, immigrants, the elderly, citizens in rural communities, and victims of natural disasters. Our school has a vibrant and strong tradition of fostering access to justice, and we are pleased to present programs such as this one to help ensure that that tradition lives on. Given the political metamorphosis in Washington, with the threat of the elimination of funding for direct legal services to nearly 2 million people annually, services critical to the helpfulness and hopefulness in our nation's promise of justice for all, it's hard to imagine a more compelling situation for the legal community to speak up about and to act upon. Former American Bar Association President Karen Mathis observed, ultimately, lawyering is a delicate balance between a constantly evolving world and the fundamental principles that define our legal systems. It calls upon your compassion as well as your intellect, your heart as well as your head. Caring is as much a part of the legal profession as intelligence. It is every lawyer's responsibility in every setting to serve others. Each of today's participants truly embodies that grace, wisdom, and humanity. As the president of the U.S. Legal Services Corporation, the federal agency that funds free legal services to low-income communities throughout the United States, James Sandman leads what is by far the largest source of civil legal aid funding in the United States. Jim is also an esteemed member of the Albany Law School Board of Trustees and a supporter of the Sandman family's Edgar and Margaret Sandman Fellowship, the law school's most prestigious fellowship program, which continues to profoundly impact our students and improve the lives of senior citizens and others in our community. Our next panelist is my former classmate, City of Albany Mayor Kathy Sheehan, class of 1994. Mayor Sheehan is the 2016 recipient of Albany Law's Distinguished Alumna in Government Award. Kathy is the mayor's deeply committed to developing solutions to reduce and eliminate poverty and to ensure equality throughout the city of Albany, which was recently selected to participate in Governor Cuomo's Empire State Poverty Reduction Initiative. Another classmate is here today. Where is she? Joanne McCree, also class of 1994. It was a good year for Albany Law School. Joanne McCree is the director of the regional initiatives at the New York State Office of Indigent Legal Services. Joanne received the law school's 2016 Alumni in Government Unsung Hero in Government Award for her breathtaking behind-the-scenes career-long contributions in her current position, and formerly as director of the Criminal Defense Immigration Project and the Immigration Defense Project of the New York State Defenders Association. If there was a thesaurus entry for legal aid services. I truly believe that the first synonym that would pop up would be Lillian Moy. Lillian, as you know, is the executive director of the Legal Aid Society of Northeast New York, leading the way in providing legal services to vulnerable citizens in 16 of our surrounding communities. We're also thrilled to have her supervise our students at the Legal Aid Office, where she continues to motivate and model to the students what service to others means. Glenisa Gailliard, class of 2007, has dedicated her career to public service, beginning at the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York, where she started the first foreclosure defense program in the Capital District. She's currently legal counsel at the Capital District Physicians Health Plan and a board member with the Whitney M. Young Jr. Health Center, where she helps to provide healthcare services to low and no income residents. Last but not least, our own fierce, fearless, and first-rate advocate, Professor Sarah Rogerson, will serve as our moderator today. Professor Rogerson serves the law school in a number of meaningful ways. She's an associate professor of law. She is the director of the Immigration Law Clinic, and she is the director of our Law Clinic and Justice Center. According to former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, the measure of a country's greatness is in its ability to retain compassion in times of crisis. No nation in recorded history of man has a greater tradition of revering justice and fair treatment for all its citizens in a time of turmoil, confusion, or tension than ours. This is a country which stands tallest in troubled times, a country that clings to fundamental principles, cherishes its constitutional heritage, and rejects simple solutions that compromise the values that lie at the roots of our democratic system. With those challenging and inspiring words, I'm pleased to turn the podium over to Professor Rogerson and our esteemed panel.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you to everyone for coming, and thank you, Jim, for being here. I just wanted to bring a couple of items to your attention, which will boost the interactivity of this exchange that we're about to have. First, I want to bring attention to the title, Access to Justice, right? When you think of access to justice, you don't actually think of being able to walk into a courthouse. Those aren't issues that we've had to face in full, in all of their evil resolve until this moment where we have immigrants who are being arrested in front of courthouses on their way to access justice. So in that theme, we've created, and these two things don't go next to each other, but a hashtag. And I'll explain why that's relevant in a moment. The hashtag A2J is justice, because we'd like for you to tweet your reactions. Get out your phones. It's okay. I see Professor Lynch on the ready. And for in a law school first, we're going to be live streaming those tweets, your reactions to what you're hearing. So be careful what you say. It will be behind our keynote speaker and the rest of us as we speak today. But this will help us amplify the message, amplify what we're talking about here so that it goes beyond the walls that contain us today and hopefully reach those court steps. So we've already had introductions, but I just want to say a little bit about the Legal Services Corporation. It was founded in 1974. As of 2015, or in the year 2015, they closed 755,774 cases. 755,774 cases, including 91,000 with the involvement of pro bono attorneys. 1.8 million people were served, families, children, individuals. And here we have the steward of that incredible undertaking. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Alicia. It's great to be back in Albany. I've lived in Washington, D.C. for many years, but this is home. I grew up in Albany and went to grade school and high school less than a mile from here. So I am very grateful for the opportunity to come back to Albany, and in particular to Albany Law School, my father's alma mater. I'd like to say a few words this afternoon about the length and depth of our nation's commitment to equal justice, then give you a brief overview of what I regard as the state of access to justice in the civil world today, and then offer some recommendations for how we can improve access to justice. My perspective comes from my position at the Legal Services Corporation, which, as Alicia said, is the country's single largest funder of civil legal aid programs. We fund 133 independent legal aid programs with more than 800 offices, serving every county in every state, the territories, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. No matter where you are in the United States, there's an LSC-funded legal aid program providing assistance to low-income people. Despite our name, the Legal Services Corporation, we don't provide any direct legal services to anybody. We fund others to do it. My experience at LSC does give me a bird's eye view of the state of legal aid in the United States today, but first I'd like to talk about the length and depth of our country's commitment to the concept of equal justice. The concept is as old as the Republic itself, older even. The passengers on the Mayflower covenanted and combined themselves, as they put it in the Mayflower Compact before they disembarked at Plymouth Rock, to constitute, enact, and frame just and equal laws. The concept finds expression in the very first line of the Constitution. The first line of the Constitution reads, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice." I think that's fascinating. The framers cited establishing justice as their goal even before they mentioned providing for the common defense or ensuring domestic tranquility. I don't think their ordering was an accident. I think they recognized that a well-functioning, accessible system of justice is essential to societal stability. It's about the rule of law. You won't long have a nation to defend or worth defending without it. This is what the great Judge Learned Hand meant when he said in addressing the Legal Aid Society of New York in 1951, "If we are to keep our democracy, there must be one commandment: thou shalt not ration justice." The sentiment is expressed in the Federalist Papers, Federalist 51, authored by James Madison. "Justice," he said, "is the end of society. It is the end of government. It ever has been and ever will be pursued until it be obtained or until liberty be lost in the pursuit." And Thomas Jefferson said, "The most sacred of the duties of government is to do equal and impartial justice to all its citizens." The value is expressed over and over again in American history. In the closing words of the Pledge of Allegiance, in the inscription on the pediment of the Supreme Court building in Washington, "Equal justice under law." This is about who we are as a country and what we hold ourselves out to the world to be. How are we doing? To put it mildly, there's room for improvement. There are a number of measures of the magnitude of what's sometimes referred to as the justice gap. The justice gap is the difference between the civil legal needs of low-income people and the resources available to meet those needs. Studies across the country routinely show that 80% of the civil legal needs of low-income people go unmet. There have been studies at legal aid programs of what I call the turnaway rate, of the people who show up seeking service and are financially eligible for it. how many are turned away because of inadequate resources? And the studies typically show a turnaway rate of between 50% and 2/3. The most recent study with which I'm familiar was done by the Boston Bar Association in Massachusetts in 2014. And it showed that in Massachusetts, 64% of people who sought legal aid were turned away with no assistance. This in a state that, compared to most, is very generous in funding civil legal services. These turnaway rates vastly understate the magnitude of the justice gap. They're not picking up the people who are above the eligibility guideline, but who can't possibly afford to pay for a lawyer. You need to understand how little you're permitted to make to qualify for legal aid in the United States today. In 2017, the financial eligibility cutoff, the income eligibility cutoff, at a legal aid program funded by the Legal Services Corporation is for an individual $15,075. For a family of 4, it's $30,750. As a general matter, if you make more than that, you're not qualified. But there are people who make $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 a year more than that, for whom a lawyer is clearly out of reach. Those people aren't captured by these turnaway rates. The turnaway rates don't capture the people who don't know where their local legal aid office is, who've never heard of legal aid. They don't capture the people who've heard of legal aid but don't bother going, because the word on the street it's a waste of time. They won't be able to help you. Another measure of the magnitude of the justice gap is the large numbers of people who appear in courtrooms across the United States today without a lawyer in high-stakes cases. The most recent information that I've seen for the state of New York showed that 1.8 million people a year were appearing in the state courts in New York without a lawyer. It is common in the United States today for approximately 95% of tenants in eviction cases to have no lawyer, even though 95% or more of landlords do have a lawyer. It is common for more than 90% of parents in child support cases to have no lawyer. And it is not uncommon in the United States today for victims of domestic violence to have to go into court alone to seek a protection order against an abuser because they can't afford to pay for counsel. Imagine that. It takes courage for a victim of domestic violence to make the decision to seek protection. That very decision could put her at further risk. What if he finds out before she can get the order? So put yourself in the position of the abused person. She screws up her courage and decides to go to visit her local legal aid office to see if they can help her get a protection order. But they're not able to help her. She may have gotten there after the doors closed for intake at 9:45 in the morning. And she then has to make a choice. Does she give up and forego the order? Or does she go it alone? If she decides to go it alone, she faces the possibility that she might walk into the courtroom and face her abuser, who may himself have a lawyer if he controls the family finances and can afford to pay for one. I have yet to meet the person who thinks that that's justice, but that is going on in courtrooms throughout America every day. I always encourage law students to go to visit their local courthouse where evictions take place and to sit for an hour and watch what happens and see if what they think they're observing is justice. So how can we improve this situation? How can we bring our practice in line with our fundamental national values? I have 4 recommendations. The first is the obvious one: more money. That's what my organization is about. I spend a good part of my time lobbying on Capitol Hill to increase funding for the Legal Services Corporation. And there are some bright spots. Most notably across the United States to me is the state of New York, which under the leadership of former Chief Judge Jonathan Lippman, who was here just yesterday, I understand, increased state funding for civil legal aid during his 7 years as chief judge from, I believe, $16 million to $100 million a year. $100 million a year for one state. I compare that to the national budget for the Legal Services Corporation, currently at $385 million. That is remarkable what you're doing here in New York. I don't think I'm being myopic in attributing that success to Chief Judge Lippman, to his leadership, to the role he played in emphasizing the importance of this issue and putting his personal muscle and the power and the prestige of his position as Chief Judge of New York behind doing something to bring the values, the practices of this state in line with the values of our country. So more funding is obviously necessary. I'm an optimist. You have to be when you're in the legal aid business. But I'm a pragmatist as well. I don't think there is ever going to be enough money to provide an individual lawyer to every person who can't afford to pay for one. Let me give you some specifics that explain my pragmatism. You may have heard that in New York City recently, Mayor de Blasio has begun to fund the provision of a lawyer to tenants facing eviction in New York City Housing Court. I saw in the New York Times that the annual estimate of the cost of doing that was $200 million a year. That's one kind of case in one city, $200 million a year, albeit the biggest city in the United States. Just imagine doing the math to multiply that out and to try to compute what it would cost nationally to provide an individual lawyer to every person in a civil legal matter, say you limit it to a serious civil legal matter across the United States. The numbers are, the money is not there. But I don't think we can let the inadequacy of financial resources cause us to throw up our hands and say, well, we'll just have to make do with what we have and continue to have the courts overwhelmed with unrepresented people and be turning away huge numbers of people who seek legal aid. I think we need to come up with solutions that are commensurate with the magnitude of the problem. That's what I so admired in Chief Judge Lippman. He broke a few eggs, you may have noticed, but he did it, and I know this from my conversations with him, because he thought that our legal system was in crisis and that we were in default on our fundamental pledge to be a nation with justice for all. And he resolved to do something about it. And I say good for him. So I have three other suggestions for how we might improve access to justice in the United States today. The first is to rethink the service delivery model, to recognize the reality that it's not going to be feasible to provide an individual lawyer in every case, but to figure out what we might be able to do that would still help, even if it falls short of that ideal. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We can't decide that our inability to provide a lawyer is going to cause us to do nothing. So there is now a movement in the United States called the 100% Access movement. It comes from the recommendation of a technology summit that the Legal Services Corporation convened in 2012 and 2013. The stated purpose of the summit was to explore the potential for technology to provide some form of effective assistance to 100% of persons seeking help with an essential civil legal need. The language was very carefully chosen. Some form of effective assistance for 100%. The goal being, turn no one away with nothing. Do what you can with what you have. And rationalize the assignment of resources to people as best you can under the circumstances, taking account of things like, taking account of things like the nature of the matter, what's at stake, the capacity of the client, the ability for them to self-represent, whether the opponent is represented and what resources are available. And then to make a decision looking at what solutions are available to make the right kind of match. In some cases, that may be a referral to a resource-rich website, which in plain language might lead people through checklists, how-to lists. It might be a referral to a self-help video, a do-it-yourself video that leads you on the tour of a courthouse and shows you how you might handle the particular matter that you're dealing with. It might be a referral to a lawyer who is willing to provide what they call unbundled legal services, limited scope representation, where the person has the capacity to pay for some legal services, but not beginning to end representation. It may be a referral to a pro bono lawyer. It may be a referral to document assembly applications that work like TurboTax, where you're led through a plain language interview online and where the application uses your answers to the interview questions to complete a court-approved form that you can then print out and file or e-file with the court. I volunteer at a clinic in Washington where I work on Saturday mornings, and I've used that application with some of my clients sometimes, and I've been frankly amazed at how it works. What you end up with after you've answered the interview questions is a document that's got a court caption on it. It has numbered paragraphs. It has headings. And it even has case citations that I didn't put in there. But most importantly, what you end up with is a document that a judge can understand. They know what the person is asking for. It looks familiar, as opposed to something handwritten on lined paper where the judge, notwithstanding her best efforts, might not be able to make any sense of what the person is seeking. Or in this system that I described for promoting 100% access, you might be referred to a legal aid lawyer to give you full case representation. So it's an ambitious goal. It does require a rethinking of how we deliver legal services and a commitment to rationalizing this process for deciding who gets what. And there's some good news about implementing this recommendation. As a result of this recommendation of the Legal Services Corporation Technology Summit, the Conference of Chief Justices, that's the organization of the chiefs of the 50 states and the territories, and the Conference of State Court Administrators, adopted a resolution in 2015 urging that states pursue as an aspirational goal this concept of providing some form of effective assistance to 100% of persons with an essential civil legal need. And then last year, a private foundation in Washington, the Public Welfare Foundation, funded strategic planning grants to allow states to begin to implement, to come up with ideas for how to pursue this concept. Initially, just strategic plans, not implementation, but strategic plans. 25 states applied for those grants, which I thought was a wonderful indication of the validity of the concept and the interest that states have in pursuing it. 7 states were selected. New York was among them. I had the pleasure of being on the review committee for the grant applications, and I want to commend anyone here who was involved in the preparation of the proposal from the state of New York. The next step after the strategic plans are prepared is that the Public Welfare Foundation intends to do a next round of grant making to fund the implementation of the strategic plans that look the most promising. But these are very concrete steps that are being taken to try to implement this 100% access concept. It's a great development. The third thing I think we need to do is to simplify our legal processes. This may be a tall order, but the reality is today that in certain kinds of high volume, high stakes cases, large numbers of people don't have lawyers. And when they try to navigate the system themselves, what they're up against is a system that was designed largely by lawyers, for lawyers, and constructed at every turn on the assumption that you have a lawyer. It's a system that works pretty well if you do have a lawyer, and it works not well at all if you don't. It is opaque, complex, intimidating, incomprehensible. If you were designing a legal system from scratch, knowing what we know today, that in large numbers of certain kinds of high-stakes cases, people would be unrepresented, you would never design the system in the way that we have it. You would recognize that the user you need to be designing for is a person without a lawyer, not a lawyer. And that would lead you to a very different place from where we are. I want to give you just two examples of what I regard as needless complexity in the civil legal system today that throw up incredible barriers to people who are trying to help themselves. In the state courts of New York, to get an uncontested divorce, you have to file between 12 and 21 different forms. The precise number depends on whether there are children involved and whether one spouse is seeking support from the other. And another example I just learned of this week. Somebody called this to my attention. This is from a website in the state of Kentucky that is a good faith effort to try to provide assistance to people who are representing themselves in divorce cases. The section of the website is titled Self-Help Divorce Options for Kentucky Residents. And then the subheading is Required VS 300 Form Certificate of Divorce. Then it reads, when you file for divorce in Kentucky, you must file a VS 300 form with the court clerk. While all other self-help forms may be submitted with handwritten entries, the VS 300 must be typed. You must complete the form online at this link. Please read the instructions for completing the form. You must print this document on 25% cotton bond paper with a visible watermark. You can purchase this thick resume-type paper at most office supply and retail department stores. What are they thinking? I did a little poll in my office the other day after I read this to see how many people, particularly younger people, knew what 25% cotton bond paper with a visible watermark was. Not many. Do you know what 25% cotton bond paper with a visible watermark costs? You have to buy it in a ream. You're a poor person. Do you think you have the money for that kind of purchase? Is this really necessary for someone to get a divorce? But although I picked this example because it's pretty dramatic, I don't think it's unrepresentative of the variety of complexities and barriers that people face across the United States. And I think we are letting our fellow Americans down when we allow this to persist. I don't think we're living up to what we say we are as a country. So my third recommendation is simplify the legal system. And my advice, when I'm asked for it, to access to justice commissions and others who are trying to improve the situation, is to start with the highest volume, highest stakes cases, the ones where the consequences of being unrepresented are the gravest, and to figure out how you might redesign the system to accord with the reality of unrepresented litigants today. And finally, and this one is always popular with lawyers, I think we need to permit non-lawyers to do a lot more. I don't think, in the interest of consumer protection, you can justify a situation where, when lawyers are unavailable, people are left with nothing because we're concerned that a paralegal might help them instead. I practiced law with a big law firm for 30 years, and I know what a good paralegal can do. This is another example of not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. If we can't provide a lawyer for everybody, let's provide the best we can. And it may be a matter of training and possibly certification. You don't want to inflict incompetence on people, but I think there is a way, consistent with good consumer protection, to loosen the rules and allow non-lawyers to do more. There is a pilot project along these lines in the housing court in New York City that was spearheaded by Justice Fern Fisher there, where they have what they call court navigators. They're analogous to healthcare navigators, if you've ever dealt with one of those. If you or a family member have had a complicated medical problem and you need someone to work with you to figure out how to get through the system, well, they have healthcare navigators. Well, these are court navigators. They can go into court with an unrepresented person. They can provide factual information to the judge, but not legal information. They can respond to factual questions from the judge, and they can stand next to the litigant and give them non-legal assistance. There's been a preliminary evaluation of this pilot done, and what it shows is that it makes a difference in outcomes, that people who have the service of a navigator are better off than those who don't. I think we need to take a lesson from healthcare and with their use of physician's assistants and nurse practitioners, the way they've differentiated service provision to align the professional with the particular procedure or nature of the problem, to be sure that people get competent help by people at the right level. So those are my suggestions. I think we can do this. I don't think this is an unsolvable problem, but I come back in the end to the approach that I think Chief Judge Lippman took here in New York. We need solutions that are commensurate with the magnitude of the problem. We have a big problem. We need to think big solutions and not be intimidated because they might be a little challenging. Thank you all very much.
All right, so you're right here. This is fine. Thank you very much. If that isn't a call to action, I don't know what is. And you've certainly got us thinking in the clinic and across the law school, really, and across the community. Jim took time out of his schedule earlier today to meet with some of our legal service providers here in the Capital District, and I think we had a really productive conversation about what we can do, act locally, right? And we will be. So I looked up what a ream of 25% cotton bond paper on Amazon Prime, anyway, is $25. Or you can buy a case of 10 for the low price of $302.99. With that, I'll call up our panelists. First, we have Mayor Sheehan. Everybody can come on up. We'll populate all of our chairs. We also have an intermittent dance party happening. I promise we'll figure out the live Twitter feed. Keep tweeting. Keep them coming. And with that, I'll turn the discussion over to Mayor Sheehan to kick it off.
Okay, and we're just each talking for 5 minutes? Sure. Yeah, okay, great.
I'll pass up a yellow paper next time.
Great. Well, I'll be brief because we have people who are living this day in and day out. And thank you so much, because I agree. I mean, this is an issue and a challenge that I see in the city of Albany, where 1 in 4 of our residents lives below the poverty level. So that means, right, we have a lot more that are struggling at those obscenely low numbers that we can't imagine a family of 4 living on, but that we don't consider to be below the poverty level. And they face the very challenges. You talk about these high stakes cases. They are involved in cases that are resulting in them losing their home, being evicted from an apartment. They are involved in cases that involve child support and child custody. They are involved in cases that involve domestic violence and having to make those decisions about what do I do when there is somebody who is really wreaking havoc on my life and on the life of my family, yet I don't have the ability to be represented and to go and to even understand what it is that I need to do in order to stop this from happening in my family. And then when you look at the challenges that we have in the city of Albany, particularly around violence, for the most part, much of the violence that we see in our city starts with domestic violence. It starts with exposure to violence in the home at a young age, and it results in a culture of violence and a system in which that is really seen as the only way of resolving conflict, because there are no other models out there. So the impact of this is profound. And you know, aside from the moral issues around that and the ethical issues and the fact that it's not just, right, and it's not what we think that we're about, the financial implications are stunning as well. So if you think about what we could accomplish in our city if we were able to ensure that people had access to courts and to justice much earlier on, right, in this cycle, think about what the different outcomes might look like. And all you have to do is drive around the city of Albany to see those red X's on buildings that are not only vacant, but so dangerous that our first responders can't even enter them and they're not safe, much less the hundreds of other vacant buildings that aren't at the point that they have the red X on them yet. Right? And each of those has a story behind them. You know, I spoke with one of our white-collar crime detectives a few years ago when I first became the city treasurer, and one of the things that he said was that if you did, you know, one of those diagrams of all of the vacant buildings and you know, like plotted how it got to where it was, hundreds of them were related to mortgage fraud that occurred, right? Mortgage fraud that occurred, and people who got on that first rung of the middle class and bought that first home only to find out that it had been transferred to them fraudulently, and then didn't have the ability to hire legal counsel to try to figure out a way that they could stay in that home. And so they just left. They just left, and these buildings sit there and they're vacant, and they're caught up in this system because there wasn't an opportunity for representation in the front end, and even an understanding of how to navigate it all, what their rights were, right? So from my perspective, this access piece is critically important because I can see in a city like the city of Albany all of the impacts of not having that access. And then you multiply that across the entire state and then across the country, and every place has a different access issue. We have the fortune of having the phenomenal Lillian Moy and the unbelievable work that she does. And so when we do send people, and we get phone calls from people, and we do send them your way, and we make referrals all the time, I know that we have people who are working on this really, really hard, but they don't have enough resource. We heard about, right, those turnaway rates. And then the last thing that I'm going to say is that you layer into this, not to overcomplicate it, but you have to layer into this mental health. Because we are also a city where we have a very high percentage of people living in different types of environments. You know, many of them are living in environments where it's supportive housing, and supportive housing for people who have mental health issues. And oftentimes, they end up being put into this eviction process, and in part, it's because of their inability to be compliant with what the rules are. And so, you know, we have an individual who comes into our office on a very regular basis who suffers from serious mental health issues, and he's being evicted. He's being evicted from his apartment, and I understand why. But the cause is not that this is a bad person or that, you know, he, you know, is a deadbeat and doesn't want to pay. It's that his mental disease is causing him to do things that are leading to him being evicted from this apartment. So that aspect of this, it's really complex. And the work that Legal Aid does and all the organizations that are funded by the LSC do is God's work. And I'm so grateful that you're doing it. And anything that I can do to help to advocate for more support to get it done, I'm there with you. So thank you.
I'll
turn it over next to Lillian. Do you want to stay where you are? Or?
I can stay where I am.
Okay.
I
Might give us a chance to fix whatever.
whatever's wrong with the thing. Okay. So, you know, I'm an old activist and a legal aid lawyer. And when they told me the name of the event was March for Justice, I thought, oh, yeah, like the long walk, right? Like the journey for justice. And only this morning when I was kind of putting it together, I thought, oh, is it because it's March 30th? However, I prepared as if it was the March for Justice. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And, you know, it is really a journey for justice in times like this when it gets kind of uphill and rocky. That vision of where we're going becomes super important. The vision of what justice is. So if you're a lawyer or a law student or an advocate for us, I'm going to give you 10 seconds of my valuable time and ask you to close your eyes and think about what justice looks like to you. Yeah, because what you see there has to be what gets you through the day, right? It has to be what sustains you. I have only a few minutes to share with you a few visions, a few pictures of what justice looks like if you're a legal aid lawyer, or maybe if you want to be a legal aid lawyer. Yeah. You guys could come in the room too, right? If you wanted to. Yeah, you could come in because it's very classic to be late if you're a legal aid lawyer. So yeah, it's fine. Come on in. Come on in. So one picture of what justice looks like if you're a legal aid lawyer is on our website. And it's a picture of a kid named Kyle Hayner. And Kyle is a kid with a learning disability, which it makes it hard for him to translate ideas and thoughts into words on a piece of paper. And our very young, fresh out of law school, lawyer in our children's law project represented Kyle Hayner and got him an individualized educational plan, one which gave him more time for written assignments and tests, an aid to keep him organized, a laptop with assistive technology to be able to produce written work easier and better. And in the year after that IEP years, Kyle Hayner's grades went from 60s and 70s to 80s and 90s. And on the day he graduated, his lawyer from legal aid was there. And there's this incredible photo of him in the cap and gown and her with the big smile. And that's what justice looks like. It's one picture, right? Another picture, and I'll shout out to Victoria, who showed me this picture. We were just finished representing a large family, 6 kids, a husband, a wife, in a rural town in Columbia County. And some of these kids are disabled, including one kid in a wheelchair. And we tried the case just a little while ago, huh, Victoria? And finally got this incredible decision. They had withheld their rent due to horrendous conditions in the apartment. And the decision only mentioned a few of them: cockroaches, bed bugs, water leaks, fecal matter. And it was 100% abatement, no rent owed, consequential damages, and punitive damages. So I hope my legal aid colleagues won't tell you that that doesn't happen every day, but it is a picture of what justice looks like, this fully favorable decision from a rural town court in Columbia County. And finally, I'll tell you the vision in my head every day, which is that there'll never be another young legal aid lawyer of color who goes to court and is mistaken for the interpreter or the client, right? And who goes back to work and whose colleagues are not warm and supportive, but instead kind of cast it off as a joke. So my vision is that there will never be another woman of color treated that way in our organizations or anyone you fund. Maybe Jim can take care of that. Some of you might be thinking about being a public interest lawyer every day. You know, especially you guys who came in late. We're with you, okay? But I hope some of you are thinking about that. And some of you might be thinking about private practice and volunteering to represent our clients on some days. And I hope some of you will do that. And I hope that you'll think about a vision that sustains our work, because that's what we need. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Joanne.
But Connie told me yesterday that I had to try to inspire you. A lot of pressure.
Just thinking I'm trying to get myself contained right now. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I just want to thank Albany Law School and also to thank our guest speaker and all of the panels here. I think the one thing we all have in common in this room is the intention to do good. And that's really what has kept us going all this time and all the work that we do, whatever it happens to be. And so whenever I think about access to justice, I start with that notion, right? We all have the intention to do good. And if we can start with that notion and build upon it, then I feel like that's where my optimism comes from. But I have to admit, I have the pragmatic side as well. In our earlier speech, the idea of talking about the justice gap, I want to take a few minutes, as many of you know, I deal with a lot of immigration issues, to talk about the Justice Canyon. When we're talking about high-stakes cases, and we're talking about what's at risk, we are talking about individuals who show up in another country, oftentimes building their lives, their families, their careers, their opportunities, based on the ability and the presumption that they'll have a chance to have a better life here. And, you know, we look at the statistics and we're understanding now that it's estimated that 1 in 5 children in the United States belong to a mixed immigrant family. This is not just about the non-citizen, but it's about all the lives of the non-citizens who are touched by the immigration issues that are going on right now. And when it comes to immigration, well, the first hurdle we have to deal with is the actual right to counsel. Despite the fact that you can have somebody represent you in an immigration court proceeding, there is not one afforded to you by any type of government entity if you can't afford it. And therefore, you go ahead and you represent yourself. Now, let me just explain the process in a nutshell. We have a circuit court decision out there that talks about the immigration process as the labyrinth. It is so complicated, it is so technical, it changes every day, that even we immigration attorneys often find it incredibly, incredibly difficult to keep up with the changes that are going on. And I cannot imagine being someone who, in many instances, can't speak English, might have limited English proficiency here to be able to represent themselves, doesn't understand the legal process, perhaps comes from environments or countries where there was no such legal process, but now has fallen into one where they understand that their entire lives could change based on one individual's decision. And then having to guide their way through very technical applications where questions like, have you ever committed a crime for which you've never been arrested or convicted? Right? Under penalty of perjury, no less. So I think the immigration community has really tried to respond to this in the best way possible. It's been an incredible struggle, and there's so much more to do. But we've done things like not only rely upon attorneys providing pro bono representation, having private counsel, having attorneys offer low bono representation, but we really have many of our legal services stepping up to the plate and offering these services when, in fact, this might not be an area that they were initially specialized to do. We have a lot of attorneys willing to jump in to help, to offer whatever expertise they can to this community. We've now started using legal navigators out in New York City to help train immigrants in filling out applications. We also have what we call accredited representatives in the immigration system. These are individuals who are not lawyers, who might be partially accredited or fully accredited. So those individuals might be able to fill out applications, represent people, or others who are fully accredited can actually go into immigration court and do exactly what lawyers do, because we understand what's at risk. And that is the ability to keep lives and families together. And in many instances, to protect people that are being basically threatened with being returned to countries for which they could potentially lose their lives. In saying all that, what I will say is that more is obviously needed. We are trying very hard as a community, a legal community, to push the knowledge of what it means to have access to justice, access to counsel, access to quality representation, particularly when it comes to the high stakes involved here. And what I would ask everyone here in my own brief closing is to say, I feel very blessed that I'm in a community of legal services folks, government entities, folks within our law schools who really understand the necessity of this area and who are all willing to pull together. We have the State Bar Association, who's really put themselves out there to try to rally pro bono attorneys to step up to the plate. We invite law students, legal services organizations to join with us in really trying to guarantee that we can improve the access to justice. And what I will say is, I am determined to close that canyon and make it only into a very small gap, if one at all. And I hope that many of you will join us. So thank you.
And last but not least, Glenessa.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm on this panel. I come from a little different take than my esteemed colleagues. I have had the pleasure of first starting my career working with Lillian at the Legal Aid Society for the first 6 years of my of being an attorney. So that was a great experience, starting the foreclosure prevention program. We've heard today from the mayor about access to housing, being able to assist those going through foreclosure, continue to have or have a way for them to stay in their homes if that's possible. And I did that through the Equal Justice Works Fellowship. I will go into that in a minute. But being able to do that work was very inspiring to me, helping different people, various people throughout the Capital District, be able to stay in their homes or at least leave their homes with some type of dignity. And so I was able to give access to justice right at the beginning of my career, and it was very fulfilling. Switching over, I was doing some Social Security work as well, assisting people who were denied Social Security benefits, help them obtain those benefits. Now, I also moved over to the government after that for 4 years, working in the Inspector General's office in the workers' comp, fighting workers' comp fraud. And you may ask, so how does that give access to justice? You're not doing the direct representation anymore. Now you're fighting fraud. Now you're in law enforcement. But as a government, being a government attorney gives us access to justice in a very, very different way. It allows government attorneys are your safeguards in a sense, your gatekeepers, and that's the way I view it. What we do is help make sure that different programs that are there for you are still there. It's very vital, for instance, for a person who is injured at work to be able to obtain some type of wage replacement benefits and medical care for their injuries. And if you have someone in there who is taking money from that system, times it by how many other people, that means that there's no benefits for you. That means that the insurance skyrockets and that's less businesses being insured, spiral, and then there's nothing there. And people rely on that money to pay their mortgages, to pay for their cars, to pay for healthcare, to pay for whatever it is that they need, food, basic necessities. And so being a government attorney, we're there to help make sure that these programs are in place. And there are thousands of us. And I know what the jokes are. Oh, you're a government attorney, you don't do anything. You work for the government, you do anything. That is so wrong. They're important. You may not like them because, you'll go in front of a judge who has you have that ticket that you got from, speeding or doing other things or texting while driving. I'm guilty of that. I did not. But, so they might not be your friend in that moment. However, if you look at it, it's a safety thing. It's to keep you and others safe. And if you get penalized a little bit for it, well, okay. So, so they are very important. And now I currently work for CDPHP as a legal counsel there, driving the business on healthcare decisions. So I have a really great breadth of experience to show that there are different ways that that justice can be provided to people. It doesn't have to be through just direct representation. I looked up the word justice, and I have to go there. I wrote it down because it was just that important. And there was, when I looked it up on the internet, you know, the internet's our friends, there had to be at least 15 different definitions for the word justice. So I picked the one that I felt best resonated with what I've done in my experience and what I think makes the most sense. And the one that I found that hit with me is where they define justice as the moral principle determining just conduct, also known as the right thing to do. And you've heard it on this panel where everyone is talking about doing the right thing, doing the good work. And being a government attorney, being a person who went through legal aid, even now working for a nonprofit healthcare company whose mission is to do the right thing towards its members. And our members don't just include people like, you know, you go to work, you get the choice of whatever plan your employer has, and hopefully CDPHP, and you know, and then off you go, you have your insurance and off you go. No, we provide care to people on Medicaid, we provide care to people on Medicare, we provide care to people who are part of the exchanges. And we were one of the first healthcare agencies to jump on the exchanges once they became available. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. And so being able to be a driver or a voice when those business decisions are being made is vital. And I speak on that now, especially dealing with women's issues. Just if you're not aware, and I'm going to read this, I was looking at this while others were speaking, only but, say, an hour or so ago, our Vice President Pence breaks a tie to take away women's health care. That's what the the headline says. And so just to get an example, the Senate voted with Pence as the tiebreaker, and I'm quoting from the article, to let states deny Title X funds to providers for reasons having nothing to do with the quality of care they provide. That includes breast exams, preventative care, including screenings for STDs, HIV, health education, and contraceptive care for women. I believe it is a vital time in healthcare for us women and men who support women, you know, to deal with these issues, and being a member and being in a part of a healthcare organization where we can say, okay, that's great, but we're going to provide it anyway, is another way to access justice for people who are on our plans. And I'm not trying to promote CDPHP in any way, but it's just understanding that there is a different way to have justice be accessed, and to be in the forefront, to be there to say, okay, we got this, you know, they're saying we don't have to do this, but why won't we? Why don't we? Why shouldn't we? And to be able to sit at that table and be that voice to do that is empowering and gives access to justice that way as well. So that is my perspective on bringing it, of having access to justice, marching for justice. My hope is that if you're not a part of a legal services provided agency providing pro bono work, or to go out, volunteer. Take some cases with legal aid. They have a plethora of them, trust me. You know, be on a nonprofit board and help steer a business in doing the right thing. The more that we have these nonprofits doing the right thing, the more they can provide access to justice for people who may not have it in their everyday lives, who cannot afford it, who cannot move forward with it. So get out there, provide access to justice. Thank you.
So I'm going to try to end on an uplifting note before we turn it over to the audience for any questions. And I'm going to tell you a story that's really a lot of the images that I saw, Lillian, when you asked us to close our eyes. And I realized when we did that exercise just now, just how impactful this particular situation, this story, was in my life, and now that of my family. When I was a law student, I waited to take clinic, and I see a lot of clinic students, which is why I'm going to tell this story. I put it off until my last semester, and I was a joint degree student, So my last semester was actually a 7th semester in the fall. And I took, probably not surprisingly, the human rights clinic, which involved immigration cases and international human rights cases. And my very first client ever in my life was a man from the Republic of Congo. He walked into our clinic without shoes on. We learned that he was living under the umbrella of the kindness of, I believe it was a group of Mennonite individuals who had taken him in. Someone had slipped him a piece of paper with the name of a pastor and a number to call when he arrived in the United States seeking asylum. He lost his entire family. He was all alone. He had nothing left. He had a degree, several degrees, and he had been a high-ranking member of an administration that had been violently ousted from power. So he's very, very smart man, but when he arrived at our law clinic, he had been reduced to a shadow of his former self. He had malaria, but he had that piece of paper, and that piece of paper led to a phone call, and the phone call led to this faith-based community taking him in, which led to him being connected to our law clinic, which led him to me and my partner, Drew Zemansky, who I will never forget. Always remember your law clinic partners. You never know. We ended up competing for the same clinical teaching fellowship without knowing it. And I was really thrilled when I got it, and then devastated to find out that the person I was interviewing against was Drew. Because Drew and I spent hours in a tiny little room with this man and with his story and hearing things that we were too young to hear, to be quite honest. Probably not. I mean, I just felt like it at the time, right? Moments, and some of the clinic students in the room, this will resonate with you, when you don't look up from the pad of paper because you can't look somebody in the eyes who's saying these things happen to them, right? And we worked and worked and worked on his case. Many, many hours. Our clinic professor would come in and knock on the door 1, 2, 3 times and finally just say, no, you guys really have to go home. Like, stop, really go home and take care of yourselves. And the case progressed. We had volunteer interpreters. More people entered this orbit of justice, right? Non-lawyers. Other individuals that the law school reached out to provide clothing, mental health services. And eventually we filed the case, but it was the end of the semester and I had to study for the bar exam, and I had to study for it in another state because I went home to see my family. So we filed the papers. I stayed to attend the interview. There's always an interview for affirmative asylum applications. And then I went home to await the decision and study for the bar exam. And I was so focused on studying for that bar exam in a very fancy law school with very fancy stained glass windows that I did not attend, and I didn't know anyone there. So I was trying to, put on my brave face about studying for the New York bar, which was very intimidating. And my phone rang, and I didn't even look at it because I was studying for the bar exam. Nothing was going to interrupt me. And it didn't occur to me until a break that it could be news. So I ran out into the hallway during a break. I listened to the voicemail, and I remember looking up, and there were the scales of justice in the stained glass windows, and the light was pouring through them. I'm not making this up, I promise. And I listened to the voice on the other end of the line say, "Nous avons gagné," which in French means we won. I knew who it was. And I was so happy that I studied really hard for the rest of the preparation period. Obviously, this man attended my LLM graduation ceremony without me asking in Texas. He he insisted on being there. He asked about my marriage when I started to have a family. He wanted to know about my family. That's what I think about when I think about access to justice. And for my students, I want you to know that's what I'm thinking about, well, among other things, when I'm teaching you. Some of you have had those experiences. Some of you will have them. And no matter where you go in your career, they will follow you in a good way. So, I don't know where to go from there. Thank you, Lillian. Keep the faith, keep going, and you never know when you're gonna get one of those calls. And with that, I'll turn it over for questions.
One other comment, a very wise professor said this to me at Albany Law School, and I was just mentioning this to her yesterday. One thing to remember in terms of access to justice and anything in your lives, never say no to an opportunity. You have no idea where that opportunity is going to lead you. As Professor Rogers was saying, if you have that real gift to be able to work with clients who stay with you for your lifetime, it's just a blessing in disguise. So I just want to mention that. Thank you.
Professor Gottlieb.
Thank you. I wanted to make a couple of quick comments and then ask a question. One was that I know several of, if not a lot of the people in this room were lobbying for your office just a few weeks ago in conjunction with the Civil Liberties Union and the NLADA. It was part of a suite of bills that we were working for. Another, going a lot further back, when I was at something called CALS, which is now known as Legal Services in New York, and I was one of the administrators of the program. We had enough different offices that we were able to compare how a lot of things were happening. And I don't want to puncture any egos because a lot of it had to do with specializations. But one of the things that we found was the most significant thing about whether we were successful in family cases was whether we had a social worker on staff, not whether we had a lawyer for that individual. And similarly, we found that our paralegals that were going down and do welfare hearings, the hearings were named fair hearings, but they weren't ever. But the paralegals that were doing that day in and day out actually had a better record than the lawyers who were doing it more occasionally. So just to support the point that Mr. Sandman was making a few minutes ago, the question that I wanted to ask, and this also ties into the healthcare thing, I know that the water department in Albany does a lot to prevent our getting into the kind of situation that some other cities have recently been publicized for. But I also know that there's a lot of lead and other things in the pipes. In my old house, I saw the lead on the lead-in line, and that was the occasion for the people telling me what the water department was doing. But I kind of wonder what Albany knows about what's flowing into people's drinking water in the houses that they live in, because we know that and I'm sure you know, that has a lot to do with the degree to which people end up needing lawyers.
So, you know, the lead and the existence of lead pipes are really in the lines that go into houses. We do test for lead on a regular basis. So we treat our water unlike what happened in Flint, Michigan. The problem in Flint was that they didn't add like a $75 chemical, right, to their, I mean, I'm exaggerating, it wasn't $75, but it wasn't a lot of money, that prevents the lead from leaching into the water. So we do treat our water so that lead does not leach into it. You know, that said, as we look at the investments that we're trying to incentivize, particularly in older homes, the water department is has its own grant program as well that would result in those lead lines being swapped out when renovations are being done. So we do try to proactively incentivize getting those out and replaced. But, there are lots and lots of lead lines that are going from the street into the house and then that are actually within houses. But we do feel confident that when we do the lead testing, and we do it in every type of house and all the sampling, it's dictated how we do it, that we have not had lead issues. But we do respond if anybody has water quality issues or any concerns, we go out and we test.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
And thank you, Professor, for raising the issue about paralegals and social workers. Our agency, which is the New York State Office of Indigent Legal Services, we support any assignment of counsel in criminal and family court proceedings when it involves parent representation in family court proceedings. And what's been astounding in the last couple of years since our agency was implemented is we've been supporting our defender community to start hiring social workers and more paralegals, because we understand that, the essence of providing access to justice is a holistic response. It's not just taking an individual that has a particular criminal matter or a family court matter individually, but to understand that there are other civil legal service issues and other issues in that person's life that have brought them to the point of crisis. So we're getting that message and we're trying to support it the best way possible. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say that the commission on which Ann Erickson and I serve, and Ann actually knows a lot more about this than me, so you can pick her answer, okay? But we are looking at the role of non-lawyer, other professionals in providing comprehensive and meaningful legal services. So I think we're kind of moving along, and quite frankly, New York State Bar Association, and some of our colleagues are here, has supported this, really embraced more maybe than you might think, right? The possibility of other professionals in the provision of legal and other services. And we still have a large number of paralegals in our shop as well. So I think the non-lawyer, other professional movement is robust. Wow. It's alive and well, Steve. Okay.
And I just want to say very quickly, too, we see it in the criminal justice realm as well. If you were to ask our police chief if we needed to hire more police officers, he would say, no, I need more social workers. And so we have a law enforcement assisted diversion in the city of Albany. It's a very new program, but it's focused on diverting people into the social system so that they get the services that they need and the support that they need, rather than actually arresting them and having them go through the criminal justice system. So I think that it's an area where there's significant need, and a need to, I'm shooting it back to LSC as far as looking at that from a service provider standpoint, that it's critically important.
Thank you for your comment, Professor. I take an additional lesson from what you say. You had data that allowed you to determine that it made a difference whether there was a social worker on the case and what the outcomes were in the cases that the paralegals were working on. That's exactly the kind of thing we need. When you have inadequate resources, you want to make the most informed decisions possible about what works and what doesn't. And you can probably hire a social worker or a paralegal for less than a lawyer, but you can make much more informed decisions about how many of each you have if you've been able to track the results and find correlations like that. More of that, please.
Yes, we have a question up here.
Hi, mine isn't so much of a question. I'm not sure how many of you here are lawyers or students, but I happen to be someone that at a time in my life needed to use the Legal Aid Society, and some of you were speaking to that it's more than just a client. It's a personal experience. I went through a divorce. It was Legal Aid was there for me. I went through St. Lawrence County, and not only did they help me, but they invested in my life. And by the time my divorce came, they cried with me. And as someone that, it was very messy, it was very hard, it was a time that was very painful in my life. And if you are a lawyer, or you want to be a lawyer, or you want to be an advocate, just know that I happen to be one of the faces of who needed help. My children are the face of people who needed help. And I just really want to thank Lillian for inviting me today. I want to thank the Legal Aid Society. And I don't think you understand how incredibly valuable what you do for us every day. The people that do pro bono work and the people that stay hours and hours and hours later. You may not get a thank you every time, but please know it doesn't fall on deaf ears, and it really means a lot to us. And I just want to thank you guys. And like I said, I don't know how many of you people are, happen to be clients, but if you're lawyers, please don't ever forget the heart of it. Don't forget the heart of the fact that you're serving people. You're going to have bitter clients that are going to get angry. But at the end of the day, when I was able to go home and cry and say, thank God I am free. And I was actually sharing with someone that gave me a ride today. It says that, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, but there's something about getting the old me back that made a huge difference. And I just really want to thank you guys.
Hey, that's what justice looks like. It's a privilege to introduce you to one of the newest members of our board of directors, Michelle Wood from St. Lawrence County. Michelle, thanks for being with us. And for sharing. And can I, Sarah, if I can, ask my legal aid colleagues who are in the room to stand and be recognized as well? So yeah. And that was Brian's case. So thank you, Brian.
Yep, I have a couple of questions. I saw Professor Lynch first. So she likes me better. So for those of us at the law school, one thing that would be really helpful to the panelists, and we've actually heard an answer just now from your board member, is how do we best prepare all of our students to be able to do legal aid work when needed, whether at a big firm or a small firm, etc., and to be lawyers who communicate and support, as Jim Sandman has told us, access to justice. How do we have outcomes and factors that do that? And also, if you do have thoughts on how do we prepare law students to be team members when there are non-lawyers, right, working with non-lawyers in technology in terms of access to justice. So if you have thoughts on either of those questions, I'd love to hear.
Well, I would like to take this one. In my spiel earlier, I stated I was going to go into what Equal Justice Works is, and it's a nonprofit organization based out of DC to help new attorneys just graduating from law school fund a project. Any project that they so choose, they have to put forth a proposal, go through interviews, so on and so forth, within their communities that's new, that's different, that's innovative, and provide new ways to access justice. I was lucky in 2007 to be one of those fellowship recipients, which started the Foreclosure Prevention Project at Legal Aid, which is still ongoing to this day, which I'm very proud of. So that happened through a whim, where I received an email from a faculty member here who said Legal Aid is looking for someone to be Equal Justice Works fellow. I never heard of this thing before. So I went to that faculty member and said, hey, tell me what that's about. And they did, and within 2 weeks I sat with Lillian, we came up with a plan, and then the rest is history. I encourage faculty members to state this project because I know a lot of attorneys want to go into be in public interest, and a lot of them go towards the sexy public interest, so I say, like prosecutorial work or defense work, and not really look so much at work at places like Legal Aid working for the clinic, in the Albany Law School clinic in whatever way. Because that's, if you're not a big law, then you're a prosecutor. So we as a profession, I believe, have to start making that turn in thoughts and showing the value of working for a place like Legal Aid and what you can get out of, because being a lawyer means that you're helping people. That's what our profession is. You're here to help people with their everyday lives. And that's vital. And so the professors, I believe, need to put that forth and speak about that. Also, as you move forward, because sometimes you can't afford school loans, just call them what they are. It's hard to afford working at a legal aid salary. If you go to private, seek out your pro bono coordinator. Take some cases on. Because even legal aid has a plethora of cases in various different areas that may be of interest to you. Volunteer. Put some work in, because you're able to do the pro bono part as part of your hours check with your firm. What I really liked was the fact that pro bono became a necessity for being a member of the bar. I think that was also a great way to steer our law students towards doing more pro bono work. So my thing is, have it here at the law school. Make it a part of the legal profession as a whole. And I think more people will then veer towards the pro bono work or working for a legal services type of organization.
I think people should take the clinic, any clinic. I mean, you got rid of securities, right? I'm just saying. You don't have to say anything, okay? You should take a clinic. And my clinician and friends at the law school, I'll say to you that one of my oldest colleagues, a paralegal from Legal Assistance of Central Mass, is now instructor at the Legal Services Center, Harvard's clinic. And so maybe you want to think about that in terms of modeling lawyers' abilities and to work with non-attorneys in a really productive way. And I want to also shout out to your JD MSW program, because I think that's also a really important tie-in for working with non-lawyers.
I will just say I'm not going to use a mic because apparently I'm never told to speak up. But if I do, I have to say Albany Law School's clinic, and it's not just a plug, it's a reality, really brought me my world of opportunity. And I think that I consider it not just a clinic, I think of it like a legal incubator. I mean, it brought me sort of different types of experiences that later on in life, as Professor Lynch knows, when you asked how to improve it, I think what you're doing is astounding. I think what we need to do, though, is support it even more. That's my perspective from the legal community. I consider them to be legal incubators. They prepare us for all sorts of different experiences in the future. And I think that it should be something that each student should experience, whether they want to go into public interest or not. Because I think what your clinics do and have done over the many, many years is that you prepare us to be lawyers. And that is the most important thing. Technology will come with the time, right? As technology develops, you'll be able to integrate that. But most importantly, we need our students to think and to be like lawyers. And that means really understanding the reality of the practice, the challenges, the trials, the tribulations, and the time and the work and the effort and the dedication. So I just want to say, you got it down. The only difference is, though, is I think we as a legal community need to spend more time to support them like legal incubators, to give students the creativity to go out and create more projects on their own. So that's where I think our focus should be.
Quick question for Mayor Sheehan. So many of our students and graduates in the current political milieu are thinking about running for office. Do you think that how can an elected official promote access to justice other than putting more money towards access to justice?
I think it starts with the things that you pay attention to within an entity like a city, right? You have so many different demands that occur on any given day. And it's what you pay attention to. So if you're paying attention to things like one of the focuses that we've had over the last 3 years, literally transforming the entire culture of a police department, and being relentless in the focus on that, right? And ensuring that it is not just something that you pay lip service to, but that is being worked on every single day. And when you come up against barriers to moving the work forward, you're doing all that you can as an elected official to get those barriers out of the way and to find a way to get to what it is that we need to be doing to keep the work moving forward. That's how you signal what is really ultimately important. And for our community anyway, that's a really important part of access to justice, right? It's keeping people out of the criminal justice system who shouldn't be there in the first place. So it's looking at, we have very limited resources. It's always a challenge, but it's what you focus on. So one of the things that we've done with the law school, because we've come to you and we've said another injustice in our city is the condition of many of our neighborhoods, right? And it's an injustice. It's a system that was set up decades ago when it was just impossible for anyone to think that property would just sit empty anywhere because it always had value, right? And so you have this foreclosure system where, in my neighborhood, I would never put my house on the market by putting a little ad in the newspaper saying, come on Tuesday with a certified check, right? And I'll sell it to the highest bidder. I mean, I wouldn't sell property in my neighborhood that way, but we sell property all over the city that way, right? And so it was recognizing that we had to, for justice reasons, right? Social justice reasons, we needed to find a new way. And then it was advocating for a land bank, and then it was funding that land bank, and then it was working with the community to understand what the land bank does. And, so it's what you spend time on and where you focus your efforts that I think can lead to access to justice, even when you're begging the state for $12.5 million.
I'd like to make a comment as an outsider. I participate in many access to justice events across the United States. I've never been on a panel with a mayor before.
Yeah.
Or with any elected official. I think it's extraordinary that Mayor Sheehan is spending her afternoon here, and I think it says something about her personal commitment to access to justice that she's here. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I think I saw one last question over here. No? Right there. Oh, way up in the back. I see. Yeah. It's like Lauren Kovich. It's all right. She's pretty
Oh,
yes, ma'am.
Yes. Hi, I'm Shaniqua Burke. I'm a staff attorney and pro bono innovator at the Legal Aid Society with Lily and a few others here. I am the contact person for intern recruitment and placement, so if you are interested in volunteering with us, we have a few summer positions still available if you're still, interested in working with us, and then during the fall and the spring, we have rolling applications. So please, check out our postings. They're on the Career Services website and then on the LASNY website as well. Thank you.
Well done. I think we have time for, there was one last question down here, and then.
This may be too big a question for the end of the program, but the Trump administration, what do you see? What are the biggest hurdles that you see, let's say, in the next few months? I know for you.
Well, I'll take part of that. So, I think it's fascinating that sanctuary cities like the city of Albany are being threatened with having federal funds taken away, and then at the same time, they're just taking all the federal funds away anyway. So, we get a shrinking amount of community block grant and HUD funding every year. It's always cut. But it is essential. It funds essential services that are provided in this city, like funding our homeless shelters, like ensuring that people with HIV/AIDS have access to the health care that they need, programs that are very small, but with these small dollars are able to serve and really help to change the trajectory of the lives of young children living in poverty. So what we're now being told is that the 2017 dollars that we were relying on are going to be cut by 50%, and that the entire program is going to be eliminated in 2018. So, this idea that we're somehow going to cut our way by eliminating things like the Legal Services. You're on the chopping block, right? Legal Services Corporation. It's really stunning to me. And then, of course, I have the arts organizations reaching out to me because of NEA. So I think that it is a time for the grassroots, because it's the roots that are going to be ripped out by the loss of this funding. This isn't just something out there that's esoteric, or this is going to hit home very, very, very hard. So I'm really concerned about this approach to cutting this funding. I'm not saying that we can't be better and that we can't be more efficient, but I think we're starting in ways that are going to hurt people tremendously, and have impacts that are long range negative impacts. So that's what I'm concerned about.
Can I just say, there is a little light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully. Seattle, the mayor of Seattle, the city of Seattle has filed a lawsuit against the federal administration as of yesterday, claiming 10th Amendment violation of the spending clause with respect to the Trump administration's threat to cut the funding based on those individuals in the city who might not necessarily be what they deem to be compliance. Now, the trick to that, however, is that Seattle is a city where their city employees are not asked to collect any information regarding immigration status, right? So they are in compliance, just don't have anything that they can turn over that they don't collect. So I think that, Mayor Sheen is right. I think this is the time. I always feel like the darkest moments are really where we actually start to see what light looks like. And I think right now, with the challenges, and I don't want to minimize what they might be that are ahead of us, I think that this is where the creativity is starting to happen. Where everyone, we find bar associations, law schools, nonprofit agency, government entities all starting for the first time, I think, to really think together to figure out solutions. Now, I don't say we have the answers, but this is a unique time. When we're sitting here having government entities, nonprofit organizations, local bar associations, state bar associations, law schools, all starting to really try to figure it out, I have hope. Now, whether that leads to a favorable response or not, I do have hope. And that's something that I think we can really support.
Vanessa? Were you going to say something, Jim? I wanted to say, I'm prepping for a panel I'm speaking on in Hartford in a couple of weeks with several other Asian American lawyers. And in a kind of stereotypical way, we're, super educated, and most of them are very, very successful. Not that I'm not successful too, right? And we talked about what is our personal reaction in that demographic to what's happening with the current administration. So I talked about the proposed cut to LSC and about the proposed cuts that will also gravely impact on our low-income clients. And that crystallized for everyone that even though we are very privileged in a way, right, this group of lawyers, that we have fears on personal and professional and ideological levels for this community, and whether we fear that we might be, or that our children might be, victims of hate crimes because of the current attitudes. And so I say, we're a little afraid, but I don't want to end on a negative note, so I'll be with Joanne, that we think the lawyers could save us, but also people like you who are in the audience and who are committed to access to justice.
And on that note, if you go to defendlegalaid.org, I'm told you'll get some information about how to contact your local electeds and raise some noise about this issue. Defendlegalaid.org.
And as an elected, I just cannot stress enough, it does matter. If you think that going onto a congressperson's Facebook page and putting a comment on there doesn't really do anything, you are wrong. They are paying attention. And so it really, really, really matters.
All right, thank you very much.